In the deepest part of the sea stood the palace of the Sea King. And he had 6 daughters. They played in the garden all day long. Unlike the other princesses, the youngest was quiet and brooding. And her name was the Little Mermaid. Most of all, she loved listening to stories about the world of people. Traditionally, a mermaid could only rise to the surface for the first time in her 16th birthday. And now it's time to see the land and the youngest princess. She surfaced close to the ship, singing and music coming from the deck. This was the first time the princess saw the ship. In the cabin of the ship, the Little Mermaid noticed a handsome prince. For a long time she could not take her eyes off him. Suddenly, a violent storm began at sea. The prince's ship hit a rock and shattered into pieces. In complete darkness, lightning flashed, and the Little Mermaid saw the prince fall into the sea. She rescued him by bringing him ashore. Soon the prince was found by a girl passing by. When he woke up, he smiled at her and thanked her for saving her. The Little Mermaid became sad that the prince did not even know about her existence. She dived into the water and swam away. From her father's stories about people, the Little Mermaid knew that they considered the fishtail of mermaids to be ugly. Therefore, in order to please a person, one had to acquire 2 legs. The next day, the Little Mermaid went to the sea witch. The sorceress agreed to make a potion for her that would turn the fishtail into a pair of slender legs. The princess's gait would be graceful, but every step she took would bring unbearable pain. And if the prince married another, the Little Mermaid would turn into sea foam. In return, the witch wished to take her wonderful voice from the girl. The princess was ready for anything to be close to the prince, and she agreed. Having sailed to the prince's palace at night, the Little Mermaid drank a magic drink. A sharp pain shot through her and she passed out. Waking up in the afternoon, the girl saw the prince in front of her, and lowering her eyes, found 2 legs instead of a fishtail. The prince tried to find out who she was and how she got here, but the Little Mermaid could not speak. Despite her airy gait and beautiful dancing, she felt terrible pain in her legs. The prince became more and more attached to the Little Mermaid, but still treated her like a cute little child. It never entered his head to make her his wife. Once the prince admitted that his heart is occupied by the one who saved him long ago on the shore, and they are going to get married. The Little Mermaid was very upset, but could not tell him the truth. When it was time for the wedding, the prince invited the Little Mermaid to go with the newlyweds on a honeymoon trip. A luxurious honeymoon tent is spread out on the deck of the ship. The Little Mermaid had one last evening left to be with the one for whom she left her home, gave her wonderful voice and endured endless torment every day. But he didn't even notice them. When silence fell on the ship, the Little Mermaid sat on the deck and waited for the first rays of the sun. Suddenly, near the ship, she noticed her sisters. They tearfully asked the witch to help save the princess from death. The sorceress gave them a sharp knife, with which the Little Mermaid was to pierce the heart of the prince. A drop of his blood would turn her legs into a tail, and she could return to the sea. The Little Mermaid looked into the tent, and saw there a sleeping couple in love. She did not find the strength to take the prince's life, and threw the dagger into the sea. With grief, the Little Mermaid threw herself into the water. But the kindness of the princess melted the heart of the wicked witch. The sorceress cancelled her spell, and the Little Mermaid again had a fishtail instead of human legs.
Once upon a time there was a little, nice girl. She was sweet to everyone who only saw her. But she was the loveliest and dearest of all to her grandmother, who did not even know what to give her beloved granddaughter. Once she gave her a red velvet hat. And since this hat was very suitable for her, and she did not want to wear anything else, they began to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Once her mother asked to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine to her grandmother. They say that she is both sick and weak, it will be good for her. She ordered my mother not to run away from the road, otherwise she would fall and break the bottle, and then grandmother would get nothing. And when she comes to her grandmother, so that she does not forget to say hello to her. Little Red Riding Hood obeyed, took the presents and set off. And my grandmother lived already behind the forest, half an hour walk from the village. And as soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she met a wolf. The girl, however, did not know what kind of fierce beast it was, and was not in the least afraid of him. She greeted politely. The wolf also behaved very decently, so Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf that she was bringing gifts to her beloved grandmother. And while she was telling how to get to her grandmother's house, the wolf thought to himself how he could eat not only the old woman, but also a pretty girl. And then the wolf thought of showing Little Red Riding Hood a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. Little Red Riding Hood, as she looked at the many wonderful flowers, thought that it would be nice to bring grandmother a fresh bunch of flowers, because that would also please her. Yes, and ran away from the road to the side, and began to collect flowers. Slightly picking one flower, as the other beckons her, it is even better, and she will run after that. And so it went further and further into the depths of the forest. And the wolf ran straight to grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Grandma asked who was there. And the wolf replied in a thin voice that it was Little Red Riding Hood who brought the pie and wine. The old woman believed and ordered to press on the latch and enter. The wolf pressed the latch, the door flew open, and he ran to his grandmother's hut. He rushed to grandmother's bed and swallowed it at once. Then he put on his grandmother's dress and her cap on her head, went to bed and waited. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood ran and ran after flowers, and when she collected as many of them as she could carry, then she again remembered about her grandmother and went to her house. She was very surprised that the door was wide open, and when she entered the room, she called out to her grandmother. There was no answer. The granddaughter came up to the bed and saw grandmother was lying, and she had pulled her cap on her very nose, and it seemed so strange. Little Red Riding Hood asked with bewilderment why grandmother had such big ears. And the wolf answered in a grandmother's voice to hear better. Then Little Red Riding Hood asked why grandmother had such big eyes. To better see you, the wolf answered. And the arms are so big that it is easier to grip. And when Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf's mouth and only asked why grandmother had such a nasty big mouth, the wolf pounced on her, screaming, "So I could eat you!" And how he jumped out from under the blanket and swallowed the poor girl. Having had enough in this way, the wolf again went to bed, fell asleep, and began to snore as much as he could. At that time a hunter was passing by the grandmother's house, heard snoring and wondered if something had happened to the old woman that she snored so. He entered the house, went to the bed and saw that the wolf was sleeping there. And he has been hunting this villain for a long time. He wanted to kill him with a gun, but it occurred to him that the wolf, perhaps, swallowed his grandmother and that she could still be saved. That is why he did not shoot, but opened his wolf's mouth wide, and saw a red cap flashed there. A girl jumped out of her mouth and said that her grandmother was still there. The hunter opened his wolf's mouth even wider, and the old grandmother somehow managed to get out behind the Red Riding Hood. They were delighted, began to hug and thank the hunter. They decided to teach a cunning wolf a lesson. They brought up large stones as soon as possible, stuffed them into the wolf's mouth and belly, and carried him out into the yard. And when the wolf woke up, he saw the hunter, and was about to escape, but could not bear the weight of the stones, and fell to the ground. This delighted all three, while the wolf got up and barely dragged its heavy belly into the dark forest. They never saw him again. This is how they taught the cunning wolf a lesson, and Little Red Riding Hood decided that she would never again disobey Mother's orders.